They made more than 40 films during 1896, a year after they made the invention. These earlier films consisted of filming everyday French life, e.g. arrival of a train, playing cards and feeling a baby. On February 13th, 1895, the brothers invented an early motion picture and projector called a cinematic path. The word cinema came from this. The cinematograph is the world's first known word. Later on, in 1895, they created their first film called La Sortie des Ouvriers de la Chaîne Lumière, which translates to the output of the workers of the late Lumière factory. The film was workers leaving the Lumière factory. This is considered the first ever motion picture. The brothers' invention consisted of a single camera which was used for both photographing and projecting at 16 frames per second. They made more than 40 films during 1896, a year after they made the invention. These earlier films consisted of filming everyday French life, e.g. arrival of a train, playing cards and feeling a baby. Other early films they made were comedy shots. The first public shooting was 28th December 1895 in a cafe in Paris, which brought a lot of public attention. The brothers presented the first New Surreal, a film of the French Photographic Society conference, and the first documentaries, 4 films about Lyon's fire department. At the beginning of 1896, they sent a trained crew of cameramen projectionists to cities around the world to show films and new materials. After a while, people got bored of the brothers' films because they were basic and boring. Anyone can go outside and see the real thing. He is known as the father of special effects. He is a French illusionist and film director who led many technical and narrative developments in the early days of cinema. He is one of the first ever filmmakers to use storyboards. He tried to get the brothers to sell a cinematic path to him because he saw great potential beyond the product. The brothers refused, so he made his own. He discovered a jump cut by filming a bus. He later used this jump cut editing method in all of his films, especially for special effects. He also invented such techniques such as fade in, fade out, stop motion. His films include A Trip to the Moon, which was his first ever science fiction movie ever made, and arguably his most important special effects film, which was released in 1902. He is also known for making The Impossible, released in 1904. They both have a theme of having strange, surreal journeys. They are considered among the most important early science fiction films, though their approach is close to fantasy. Edwin used cross-cutting, also known as parallel editing, to show what occurs in 2 different places, but he didn't use that editing technique to its full potential. He started off as a producer, director, studio manager, and cinematographer with the Edison Manufacturing Company and the famous Players Film Company. Porter created over 250 films. He made films such as Life of an American Fireman, 1903, and A Great Train Robbery, 1905. This film is one of a kind because Porter used cross-cutting to show what occurs in 2 different places. But Porter didn't use his editing method to its full potential. He is responsible for introducing the concept to the American cinema, allowing others to build up on it and develop the technique. Porter joined the Edison Company in 1899, and soon after joining he took charge of the motion picture production at Edison New York studios. His role was to operate the camera, directing the actors, and assembling the final print. He did a couple of collaborations with other filmmakers, such as George D. Fleming. When he first joined the company, he worked as a projectionist in Los Angeles. In 1900, Porter was hired by the Edison Company to make improvements to the motion picture equipment. When he became charge of Edison's Skylight Studio in New York, he served as a director-cameraman for a few years. He started with one simple short films, for example, Cana Saloon, Smash was released in 1901. Griffith was an American director, writer, and producer. He pioneered modern film techniques. He did parallel editing, and he was famous for his camera angles and distance shots. Griffith took a much livelier hand in cutting up his scenes, typically shooting different moments of the unfolding action from a variety of different angles and camera distances, for example, long distance. His most remembered films are The Birth of a Nation, which is around 3 hours long, released in 1915, which he first made to be a private film but ended up releasing. The film is considered racist because the KKK are made to look like heroes. And he made Intolerance in 1916. The Birth of a Nation used advanced techniques such as advanced camera and narrative techniques, helped it be so successful. But also the time it was made because it was so highly racist. The film Intolerance was Griffith's answer to his critics. He started off as a stage extra in Professional Jealousy for the American Multiscope and Biograph Company in 1908. This is where Griffith met his favourite cameraman, G.W. Billy Bitzer. In 1908, Biograph's main director, Wallowance, got ill and his son took his place, but failed to bring success. So the co-founder, Henry Martin, gave Griffith the position. Griffith made his first short movie for the company called The Adventures of Dolly. Griffith directed 48 shots for the company that year. Griffith's final feature was in Footlights Varieties 1951, where Griffith retired. He was featured in around 500 films. He is important in filmmaking today because of the things he developed, such as camera angles, are very important in films today, such as with Mexican Standoff, because the close-up shots needed to make the film more dramatic. He also started the development of the 180-degree rule, which is now used in pretty much every film. Kuleshov made the film technique known as montage. He was a Russian and Soviet filmmaker and film theorist. Kuleshov was one of the first founders of the world's first film school. He co-directed his first movie, Twilight, in 1917, but with time Kuleshov became more interested in film theory. Kuleshov may well be the very first film theories, as he was a leader in the Soviet montage theory, developing his theory of Einstein. For Kuleshov, the essence of the cinema was editing. He discovered that the audience derived more meaning through the sequence of images by implying emotional connections rather than through actual performance. To illustrate this principle, he created what has come to be known as the Kuleshov effect, also known as montage. In 1941, Kuleshov created a book called The Basics of Film Editing. Kuleshov first used the Kuleshov effect in a video in the 1920s. The editing technique is a mental phenomenon to the viewer. It's supposed to make the viewer think one shot is used more than once. The one shot has more meaning. The first time an audience saw this, they believed the man's facial expression was different for the different things shown. When soup was shown, they saw hunger. When the lady was shown, they saw desire. But a man's expression never changed because it was the same shot every time. Kuleshov's editing theory is important because it helped other pioneers such as Einstein develop his idea and improve it. Einstein took the work of Griffith and Kuleshov one step further and used it to create powerful montages to manipulate audience and viewers. Einstein brought the Kuleshov effect into cinema. In 1920, Einstein moved to Moscow and began his career in theatre. In 1923, Einstein began his career as a theorist by writing the montage of attractions. Einstein's first film is called Golumov's Diary. The film Strike, 1925, was Einstein's fuller feature film. Battleship for Mon Kim, made in 1925, was acclaimed critically worldwide. This is his most famous film and ended up being the best propaganda film ever, even though it's all made up. The use of the montage in this film helped it become so successful. This was his only really successful film. He did experiments in his films, and the final product ended up making no sense to the audience. He was too ahead of his time. Einstein's focus in these films on structure issues such as camera angles, crowd movement, and montage. La Nouvelle Vague translates to French New Wave. It's a group made up of French filmmakers of the late 1950s to 60s. The group made movies which often reference other movies. They used techniques such as long tracking shots, and they moved the camera to make panels. In other films, the camera hardly ever moved. The group was on a tight budget, and often films were made in cast members' apartments. The actors also had to improvise with their equipment. The group also used editing methods such as jump cuts, after being told a movie is too long. They were able to use jump cuts because often the films were filmed in one long take. The cinematic stylings of the French New Wave brought a fresh look to cinema, with improved dialogue, rapid changes, and sense of shots that broke the common 180-degree axis of camera movement. In many films, the camera was used not to mesmerize the audience with elaborate narrative, but rather to play with the audience expectations. Godard was arguably the most influential figure. His method of filmmaking, often used to shock and awe audience out of passivity, was abnormally bold and direct. His method of challenging awareness, represented by this movement, remains in cinema today. The group filmmakers made no attempts in suspense to viewers' disbelief. In fact, they took steps to constantly remind the viewer that a film is just a sequence of moving images, no matter how clever the use of light and shadow. This was something classic French cinema wasn't doing, so it was new and fresh. To do this method, you just need to set of oddly disjointed scenes without attempt of unity, or an actor whose character changes from one scene to the next. Their techniques are relevant today because they showed that breaking a 180-degree wall was possible, and they used camera angles which are still used in films today, and they showed high quality films can be made cheaply, so they didn't always need a big budget.